In Federalist 51, James Madison claimed, "In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. It must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place oblige it to control itself." In essence, the constitutional government must promote the classical Republican idea of general welfare, while at the same time having limitations to protect natural rights.
The fundamental characteristics of a constitutional government are that it derives its power from the consent of the governed and establishes an uncodified or codified body of laws that can be altered. The United Kingdom's unwritten constitution is based on the multiple founding documents, common law, and judicial precedents. For example, the Magna Carta's castle doctrine carries on the British tradition that a man's home is his castle, which provided the basis for individual rights to privacy. This later influenced the English court decision of Entick versus Carrington, which defined trespassing.
In a codified constitution, however, such as that of the United States, all powers are expressed or implied in one document. The basic structures of all three branches of government are enumerated in Articles 1, 2, and 3, but have been altered through Article 5's amendment process to better affect the rights of individuals. This ideal emanates from John Locke's Second Treatise on Government, which promoted that for government to exist, the governed must consent to a social contract with their rulers. To enact such a contract in the United States, Article 7 outlined the procedure for the ratification of the Constitution.
By creating higher law and providing for a separation of powers, a constitutional government becomes limited. Higher law exists to ensure that all constituents, regardless of social class, follow the law of the land. In the 39th article of the Magna Carta, the rule of law was developed and was enforced on all British subjects. The Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution states, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land."
Thus, every individual and institution in the United States must abide by federal law. Furthering the idea of government limitation, Baron de Montesquieu asserts in The Spirit of Laws that without separation of governmental powers, there is no liberty. Federalist 47 carries this idea into state governments. By dividing power, it is less likely to be used by one individual. This idea can be extended to incorporate checks and balances among governmental branches to prevent the abuse and misuse of governmental power by one branch.
Provisions in the Constitution set forth guidelines for the central government so that power can be used moderately to make, execute, and justify laws while providing for the interest of the public. The Commander-in-Chief Clause and the War Powers Clause allow the executive and legislative branches to check each other's military power. With the War Powers Resolution of 1973, Congress tried to assert its power, but this measure has been ignored until September of this year, when President Barack Obama asked Congress for approval for a military strike in Syria.
Congress is prohibited from suspending habeas corpus except in justified cases, as established in Article 1, Section 9. While the Military Commission Act held that the Great Writ could be suspended for Guantanamo prisoners, Boumediene versus Bush declared this unconstitutional. Lastly, Article 1, Section 2, and Section 3 set the term of office for United States congressmen. This provision keeps Congress members' intentions focused on their constituents' interests because it is their constituents that re-elect them. To further check congressional power, Representative Stephen Palazzo has proposed a limit to the number of terms congressmen can take, so they must return home to live by the laws that they create.
With the consent of the people, the fundamental characteristics of a constitutional government create structure. Adding provisions into the Constitution can create a limited government and provide for the protection of natural rights and the general welfare. Thank you.
3 minutes and 53 seconds.
Okay, that's good. Right on time. That's good. How do you think the Founding Fathers would feel about the fact that the Constitution has been amended so few times?
I think that many of the Founding Fathers, especially the ones who were in accordance with the Federalist point of view, would be happy that the Constitution has been amended so few times because that shows that it's functioning and doing what it's supposed to and protecting the citizens' rights and the general will like it's supposed to.
Can you give me some examples of our Constitution's unwritten Constitution?
An example of this is precisely the amendment process found in Article 5, which allows amendments to be added into the Constitution more so than the ones that are already there.
You can also look at the implied powers that are within the Constitution, as well as the rules that are set for the Congress and how they're allowed to make their own rules. that are stated within both of their houses.
Another example of the unwritten constitution is the president's power to make executive orders, which have the weight of law but are not actually law and are used to fill in the gaps of legislation that Congress creates. An example of this would be when we sent troops into Iraq without actually declaring war.
Judicial review, the precedents in judicial review, are, I have no idea where I was going with that, sorry.
Okay, hold it right there. She's struggling right there. What should you guys be doing?
Well, I'm filling in.
Yeah, pick her
Okay,
up.
go for it. Okay.
Okay?
Help her out.
Well, I think what Alexis is trying to say is that in our Article 3, Sections 1 and 2, it can be meant to imply that judicial review was something intended by the founders.
The last part of the question that you were to answer, don't want you looking at anything you wrote. Okay, it said, explain how these provisions work in our system of government today. What did you answer to that? How did you answer that question?
Well, one of our answers was the commander in, oh, yeah.
Don't look there.
Well, I was right. I looked after the commander-in-chief clause, which later, is a check on the legislative power to declare war.
Anything else you threw in there?
We were also discussing how, and how the government can limit natural rights and in what cases, and we used the example of habeas corpus, which ties in with the Guantanamo Bay prisoners who actually got that right back after it was suspended by the government,
What right did they get back?
the right to habeas corpus.
We also,
Is there anybody there now that's still there, that's been there for a long time and has not been charged with any crime?
The condition of habeas corpus being suspended for the Guantanamo prisoners has constantly been debated. There's been multiple acts put into place that suspend the right, and multiple times they have been ruled unconstitutional, but it's an ongoing debate.
Does it change anything? Has it changed anything? Maybe we watched 60 Minutes last night? Yeah, last night it was all on a huge deal on Guantanamo Bay, and how prisoners have been there for 11 years and have not been charged. Even foreign countries are asking for release of prisoners that went there from Great Britain. So,
back to the original question, another provision that we used was term limits, and the term limits, oh god.
Going off of what Alexis was saying, when we had an assemblyman from Reno come and visit us, Assemblyman Bobson, he discussed how in the state legislature, assembly people often spend the first 2 years that they're there just trying to find the bathroom. And so why we were talking about term limits is that it's important for Congress members to be in Congress long enough to gain the experience necessary to actually perform their duty while not being in there too long to become corrupt.
is there another way we could do it without messing with term limits? Is there another way we could bring legislators up to speed for what they need to know, how they know, and how to function, so they can find the bathroom earlier and, get on with the business of what they're governing?
Another way to ensure this is by limiting how much money a person can give to their campaign. Because if they don't get enough money, they can't be reelected.
Okay, I understand what that is, but how does that relate to getting someone up to speed to be able to legislate faster?
Because they might not get reelected again if they don't have enough money for the next term.
If,
I'm-
going off of what Danielle is saying, I think also if the issue of campaigning money is taken out of the equation that takes Congress members' focus away from their campaigning in their next reelection and forces them to focus on the issues at hand, which would force them to be brought up to speed with current legislation and proposals.
Have you ever heard the term lame duck? Hmm?
What about it exactly?
Well, what you're saying is that if they aren't gonna be, going through a reelection process, then they're gonna just concentrate on what the issues are. Okay, so what's gonna happen with other legislators knowing they're not gonna be around again? Is there any effect that way?
Would you please repeat that one more time?
Okay, we were talking about if someone can't go for reelection because they don't have the funds to do it. So then your statement is that they would concentrate more on the issues and be a better legislator for the issues. My question is, if the other legislators that are around, what kind of credibility they're gonna give someone that may not be there to follow up on things that, they may, put forth. They basically become a lame duck in that session. Okay, basically lack of respect for them. Okay, where would you think that would fall?
That completely varies. It depends on why that representative or senator could not find the means to get the money to rerun for election. If it's for some reason that he's a bad legislator or he's a bad representative, then yes, the other representatives or legislators will be less likely to want to work with him and help him pass legislation that he puts through. Or if it was just the reason that maybe he had something wrong where he had to spend a lot of money, or he lost a key piece of legislation, or he voted on a key piece of legislation and lost some support by lobbyist groups or firm supporter, then there might be those people who still support him when he's passing legislation during his lame duck session.
You use a lot, you guys are always saying about money. What time, is it time?
It's 8 minutes.
Okay. Well, okay, then I'll just start in on my evaluation. Since all you guys are talking about is money, but is that all there is to being a good legislator? Is campaign money? What about education? What about prior knowledge of, depending on their background or things like that? And you guys didn't even touch on that. You got this idea that the only reason somebody's gonna do well is because they're gonna spend a lot of money. And in California, they proved it wrong because, who was it, the woman that